Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. This Florida State team has a ton of national hype heading into the 2023 season, but a lot of the talk that you hear about this Florida State team has to do with Jordan Travis and the offensive side of the ball. And don't get me wrong, many of you guys who've been listening to me this summer, this is one of my darling teams heading into 2023, and the offense is going to be phenomenal, right? Jordan Travis, Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, a really, really good offensive line that has added some depth. What I don't think is getting talked about enough is how good this Florida State team can be on the defensive side of the ball in 2023. And quite frankly, how good they were in 2022 when they were fully healthy. I mean, this Florida State defense had to deal with a lot of injuries. A lot of guys were not playing at 100%, but when they were, especially towards that latter half of the season after that bye week, I mean, 3 points to Miami, 3 points to Syracuse. They did give up some points against Florida. We'll talk a little bit about that. But on aggregate, this was a very, very good group in 2023, and they are second in the country in returning production heading into the season. Going to take a deep dive into this Florida State team now. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been a blast talking this Florida State team. It's no secret that I'm very high on this program. We've also talked a lot on the recruiting trail, right? Mike Norvell has this thing going in the right direction, and this could really be a springboard year for Florida State in terms of where they want to go with this program. Very excited to get into it again. If you do enjoy the content, lock in, subscribe to the channel. Can't thank the Florida State fans enough for rocking with the boys like you guys have. And I'd love to hear you guys in the comment section letting me know some players that might be some breakouts that maybe I'm sleeping on. Without further ado, let's get into it. And I want to start with taking a look at last year and talking about some of this Florida State numbers. One of the things that I think is the most special about this Florida State defense is how good they can be rushing the passer. And they don't even need to really bring pressure. You take a look, they had a 10.4% sack percentage on opponent dropbacks. You talk about an elite pass rush with only really having to bring 4 guys. That's what Florida State has. And when you look at keys to having an elite defense, I think that's probably the biggest thing that you can have, right? Causing negative plays, creating havoc. That's how you create turnovers. And Florida State might be one of the better units in the country in terms of getting after the passer without really having to bring much pressure. You taking a look at that group, Jared Verse is a guy that a lot of people think he's capped. And that's a really interesting conversation to have. I would remind people that 2 years ago, during the COVID year, I mean, he got his season canceled at Albany. He's coming from the FCS, jumping up to the Power 5, and there was a lot of hype around Jared Verse last year because he was a big name in the transfer portal. He got acclimated to this Power 5 level much faster than I think a lot of people thought. And imagine him getting a full offseason with this Florida State strength staff, coming back for year 2 at the Power 5 level. I wouldn't be surprised if Jared Verse even takes a step up in terms of how good he can be. And he's one of those guys that played a lot. He was not 100% healthy. You take a look at those Wake Forest games, it was very evident that Jared Verse was banged up. If Jared Verse stays healthy for this season, you're looking at arguably the best pure pass rusher in the whole entire country. And you combine that with the guy on the other side, Patrick Payton, who this is where, if you're not a Florida State fan, you might not be familiar with Patrick Payton. He's going to be a true stud. And part of the reason why Derek McClendon, quite honestly, just transferred out, because Patrick Payton is going to get a ton of work. And what I love most about this team is the depth they have on the defensive line. We haven't even mentioned a guy like Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk coming from Western Michigan. Those are 2 guys who are elite pass rushers from the inside. And then on your 2 deep, you have Gilbert Edmond, who is one of South Carolina's most productive pass rushers in the SEC last year. And so what I think I'm most excited for about this Florida State team starts up front and how well they can get after the passer without really having to bring pressure. And the depth. I mean, mention a guy like Darrell Jackson, who we're still waiting on the NCAA waiver, which is ridiculous that we're still waiting at this point. But that's something that this Florida State team was really good last year. They struggled when they weren't healthy. I think Mike Norvell saw maybe a little bit of lack of depth at certain positions and went out and addressed it, right? Darrell Jackson, Braden Fisk, Gilbert Edmond, all providing not only top-tier talent, but a lot of depth for this program. And again, if you want to accomplish what Florida State wants to accomplish in 2023, you need to have that depth because you are going to get banged up week 10, week 11, week 12. And as you get into the college football playoffs, ACC championships, whatever that looks like, You got to have guys who are able to step up. And I think Mike Norvell kind of fixed that aspect in terms of the depth, especially on the defensive line. Now, one thing that I want to talk about with Florida State is I think they got to get a little bit better against the run. You saw the Florida Gators were able to mash it on a little bit. And when they struggled on defense, I think a large portion of it was the inability to stop the run, especially with Florida State trying to run. I mean, they're base nickel, right? So they are inherently just a little bit of a smaller defense. You saw that really benefit in their pass. I thought the secondary was phenomenal, right? You take a look, only giving 165 yards per game through the air. That's fourth best in the country. I think if you're Florida State and you're a Florida State fan and you're talking about how does this defense take another step, and it was already a damn good group in 2022, one is obviously it's just got to stay healthy. The second is stopping the run. And I think Florida State adding that depth and staying healthy is going, that's kind of the fix, right? Fabian Lovett, when he's in, I mean, there's not many better guys against the run than Fabian Lovett. You go out and get Brandon Fisk. And one other thing I'll say, we talk about Jared Verse being an elite pass rusher. I don't know if there's a better edge defender in the country who's better against the run. Watching some games back, his ability to stack and shed blocks and get off blocks and hold the edge and make tackles in the backfield in the run game and how physical he is in the run game, I think is partially the reason why you saw him being a top 10 pick in 2023 if you wanted to declare for the NFL draft, right? You see a lot of guys who can, if they have to just pin their ears back, they can get after the passer. Jared Verse certainly can do that. That being said, when you kind of watch Jared Verse on a down in, down out basis, he is one of the better edge defenders in terms of stopping the run as well. Now, the rest of this defense is you take a look at some defenses. I always start with the defensive line, how well you can get pass rush, but I love having veteran linebackers that can just find the football. And I think Florida State has two guys who are massively phenomenal at what I just said, right? Tatum Bethune coming from UCF, not many more productive linebackers in the country than Tatum Bethune. Now, I think he's emerged as kind of a true leader at Florida State. He was a great leader at UCF. He's a guy that I don't know if you're going to see him in like the top 50 NFL draft picks. That being said, one of the better linebackers in the ACC. You combine that with Kalen DeLoach, you have DJ Lundy coming off the bench. That's a really good group, but most importantly, that's an experienced group. And that's what you want in your linebackers, because a lot of linebacker play has to deal with recognition, being able to fill your gaps, having that gap integrity. And I trust Florida State's linebackers to do just that. Are they first round picks in the NFL draft? I don't know about that, but they're damn good college football linebackers. Now, the back end is probably, when you talk about depth, that's probably where you're maybe a little concerned, especially at that safety spot. That being said, if they can stay healthy back there, this was a secondary that I thought was really good, and they go out and get better in the transfer portal, adding one of the top cornerbacks in the class, Fentrell Cypress, in the transfer portal. You have Greedy Vance, who I think is going to play more of that nickel. I think he's really solid. Renardo Green was an all-ACC caliber guy last year. You have Akeem Dent, who's played a lot of football. Partially the allure of this Florida State defense is how experienced they are. And that's kind of the storyline with Florida State coming in. As you look across the country, I don't think you can find many rosters that are as complete and without holes as Florida State. And on the defensive side of the ball, that's about as evident as it gets. The defensive line loaded with talent, and now they've added some depth. You have two phenomenally veteran linebackers in Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach. And then in the secondary, a group that, again, you really only lose Jamie Robinson to the NFL draft, which is wild that Florida State's defense was a top 20 defense according to almost every metric you look at. But they only lose one guy to the NFL draft, and that's Jamie Robinson, who was solid, but I believe is a day 3 pick. Now, the last thing I want to close out on is Florida State stopping the run. And if they can do that with kind of staying in that base nickel, that's what I think is most exciting. We talked about some of the guys that have to do that. I think Florida State and Florida State fans are going to find out really quick, because LSU has one of the best offensive lines in the country. They got a staple of good running backs, and Jaden Daniels can run too. If Florida State can show us week 1, Sunday night, they can stop the run, kind of staying in that nickel, having guys like Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse up front. If they can do that, I think this Florida State defense, it's hard to see them not being a top 10 group in the country. And quite frankly, if they can get through LSU and show that physicality, I don't know if they're losing another game. and you're going to see this team in the college football playoffs, because I'm very high on the LSU Tigers as well. But that's the thing that I'm keeping my eyes out most, is if Florida State struggled, and granted, when they did struggle, it was really because they just weren't that healthy. If they can stop the run against LSU for week 1, this is a team that you better look out, because it's going to be one of the most dangerous teams in the country, because that offense is going to score a lot of points. But this defense might be one of the best units in the whole entire country. They're experienced. They're talented. I guess we'll close it out. I'm counting guys who are going to be playing in the NFL after this year or in their future. Jared Verse, Fabian Lovett, Braden Fisk. I think Gilbert Edmonds a draft pick. Patrick Payton's a draft pick. Tatum, but one of those linebackers probably a draft pick. Fentrell Cypress, potentially a draft pick in the back end. Those are like 6-7 guys who are going to be playing in the NFL in a couple of years, if not in less than 12 months, on this Florida State team. This is a unit that has star power. It has depth. And this is going to be a phenomenal unit in 2023 that not enough people are talking about. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Had to do a little deep dive on this Florida State defense for nothing else than just letting people know that this is not only an offensive team, has an elite defense as well. Appreciate the support you guys have shown. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.